Hello again and welcome. Michael Pizzolla here. I'd like to welcome you to this edition of the Value Capping Rant. This is the 2019 Kentucky Derby Value Capping Rant, and I'm excited to be sharing this with you. This is a very interesting derby. Now, I don't necessarily think that's a great thing. There's that old Asian proverb, may you live, it's actually a curse, may you live in interesting times. Well, this is an interesting race. In this video, I am going to go very quickly through some of the Derby preps so you can get an idea of what the horses and the leading contenders in the Derby, how they've come up to this race according to Value Capper. And I'm going to give a quick review of the Kentucky Derby for those of you who just want to know, hey, who does that guy Michael Pizzolla like? And then go into a really deep dive for those of you who want to go more in depth. And speaking of that guy Michael Pizzolla, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Michael Pizzolla. I am the author of the best-selling handicapping book, Handicapping Magic, long out of print. I am the co-author of the classic Pace Makes the Race. This is even longer out of print. Very hard to get, I understand. I am the creator of the original online racing form, which in its current iteration is known as the Post Time Daily 2.0. It's a full-featured form, customizable, good product. And you can find out about it at www.posttimedaily.com. I am the designer of the Black Magic family of software. The latest version is Black Magic 2.0 called Value Capper. Look, whether you get the program, and I don't care, okay? Whether you're a computer handicapper, a pace handicapper, whatever kind of handicapper you are, the principles that I'm going to share with you and have shared with you, for those of you who have been listening in this value capping rant, will stand you in good stead in the modern game, no matter what tool you use. Whether you believe in speed numbers, pace numbers, class numbers, it doesn't matter. The principles of value capping. It's too hard for me to explain it all in a relatively short video. I don't usually do any really short videos, but I did a whole course for you, 4 full-length videos called the Value Capping Revolution Basic Training Course. And yes, the last video is all about the software and stuff, but the first 2-3 videos have so much information that you can apply directly to your game. It's a free course. You get the first video right away every couple of days, then thereafter in your mailbox. Get it at ValueCapper.com. The videos deal with the value capping framework. Value capping versus handicapping was completely different. The 5x5 formula. And finally, just the last one is about the software and trading. And I don't care. Skip that. But the principles are important. And those principles are to find and bet horses you like, right? That the public shouldn't, for good reasons, shouldn't. Preferably, you want those horses running against vulnerable favorites. Next, you need to wait for your price. No price, no bet. And then let the bet make you. Use whatever tools you're using enough so you get a felt sense of when the bet is right. Let me set a few important points or ground rules, if you would, about this, if you will, about this video. This is not a touting video. I've never been in the touting business, never will be. I don't sell selections. I don't care about being right or wrong and showing off and going woo-hoo that I won. Yes, I showed you some tickets. We're going to show you again in the Florida Derby a few weeks ago. A cold $514 exacta. So what? And I'm also going to show you a race where the 2 horses that I bet finished absolutely last and next to last, okay? So I'm not interested in just giving you a selection. By the way, look at the side of this video. There is probably 100 of them by now on Derby selections. Well, I think that Omaha Beach is going to be really hard to beat. Really? And what do you think of Gay Wormer? Well, there's another tough horse. I mean, come on. Okay? If you want to learn not only about the value things, but then maybe a little bit for those of you who are advanced, and if you subscribe to pace dynamics in a race, you can learn a little bit about I went a little in depth here, okay? So, not about touting, it's rather to demonstrate the principles of value capping. Horses you like that the public shouldn't, preferably running against flawed horses. Wait for your price, let the bet make you. I am making this video on the Wednesday before Kentucky Derby. I am assuming that the also eligible Boat Express, that 72-1 shot that triggered that $514 exacta, will be scratched. But I don't know if there will be other scratches. I don't know what the weather will be. However, clever boy, there's this great thing called the internet. And I just typed in weather forecast for Louisville. And guess what? Rain on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And that, as you will see, may have an impact on the running of this race. Also, just remember, software, numbers, all of that are tools. When I show you a race that value capper nails, fine. But honestly, knowing which races to bet, getting that feel, is much more important than a tool. I can hand a paintbrush and some oil paint, something I say, to me, and then I can hand it to, a great painter, a great artist, and the results will be remarkably different, even though the tools are the same. Okay. Last time, value investments, potentials. That's what they are. They're potentials. They are price dependent, meaning no adequate price, no bet. However, as we'll get into, price is not the same as value. Not every price horse is a good value. And not every horse you like is going to be a price. So there's a real balance here. Let me talk a little bit about price versus value. And what I want to do is go back a little bit. So, I talk about being contrarian, and value capper is based on some pretty contrarian principles or difficult to obtain information. What do I mean difficult to obtain? The numbers that we now have in there are my refinements of the numbers I did way back, late 80s. And in those days, mid to late 80s, good Lord, I'm getting up there. When I worked with the Pace Group and Tom Brohammer, I was all over his book, and then they took that out, and I wrote, co-authored The Pace Makes the Race. And these numbers were evolving. And I put a lot of input into those numbers and a lot of refinement. So there are those numbers. There are how they are used. They are how they are used to project the pace of the race. So we use them. I also use them in a contrarian way, not just taking you must take the best of the last 3 speed ratings and then you take the best pace rating. No, there's no rules like that. They're done based on what I call advanced form patterns. A horse might be coming to a race and so forth. Now, with all of that, with all of those fancy schmancy numbers, and with all of the contrarian ways of using them, sometimes the cream rises to the top. Here, the 2014 Derby. California Chrome is on top with the gap. Guess what? You won and paid 5-2. Okay, wonderful. You can't get around it. Not a great horse to bet because of the price. Wonderful horse. Colt, okay, at the time. But not a great bet. How about American Pharaoh? I had him tied with Upstart. Absolutely no price there at 5-2. And some people will say, well, he went on to win the Triple Crown. Don't you think that was a steal? No, not at 5-2. Not in a 20 colt field that had never been around a mile and a quarter before. 2016, value capper put Nyquist with a gap over Exaggerator. Guess what? Nyquist beat Exaggerator just in that order. So what I'm saying is sometimes, as much as we would like a price, as much as we apply contrarian techniques, sometimes you just can't get around the short-priced horses. How about Always Dreaming in 2017? Now, this was a tighter race, and as I recall, I may have mentioned Taprit and those horses looking for a price, but you know what? Always Dreaming was right there and paid a big price for the last few years in the Derby, paid 9-2, paid $11.40. Last year was one of the clearest derbies as far as what was likely to happen, and that is justify. Big gap from 7-1 to 11-1. Went off at 5-2. And you might say, yeah, it was a steal. He went on to win the Triple Crown. Not betting him at, well, closer to 3-1. Still, not betting. Not a good bet. I would rather pass the race, or I will admit to you, as a racing fan, on big days, I'll make recreational bets. But just take a look at these prices in the last 5 derbies. 2014, 15, 16, 17, and 18. $7, $7.80, $6.60, $11.40, $7.80. Come on. Those aren't... they may be really good colts, and in the case of American Pharoah and Justify, Triple Crown winners. They didn't justify, no pun intended, putting your hard-earned money into the windows, taking the bets of all the trouble that can happen in that big a field of those lightly raced colts. It's just not worth the investment. All right, very quick through the Derby preps, and then I'm going to, so we can get an idea of where they're coming from, then I'm going to do like a real quick 5-bar, how I think this Derby is looks from just opening up Value Capper, what it's telling me, and with those of you who use Value Capper, what it may be telling you, and I'll say goodbye for those of you who just say, well, what is this program like? And let me look at it. Okay. And then you can see that. And then the rest of us will go into a deep dive on some nuances about the race. This was beautiful, the Florida Derby, where Value Capper had maximum security with a gap over Boat Express, a maiden that I was hoping would draw in because it would just be fun. As it turned out, maximum security went wire to wire and beat, guess who? Boat Express at 71.5 to 1, 72 to 1. That exacta, for every dollar, paid 257. The trifecta was 552 for 50 cents. And I have no problem showing you some of my tickets, okay? There's a $5 box, came back almost $1,300. There's a little 50-cent trifecta part wheel with 7-8 with everything else underneath. Paid $552 for each of those tickets. Now, in the Bluegrass, which I think may be, well, we'll get to that in the Derby. We had Win and Vekoma tied at the top, and I thought Some Like It Hot Brown might run in that race at a price. There were no, and by the way, those two horses had a gap. They finished 1-2. Some Like It Hot Brown was fourth at 10 to 1, not bad. But those two colts, pretty good. Now, okay, so I've shown you, oh, wow, you've picked them 1-2 and 1-2. This must be a magic box. No. You know why? Because it's horse racing. In the Wood Memorial, I thought, boy, Over Deliver may have a shot there. Top of the line, I had a little gap on him, and I thought Outshine might not get bet. Oh, boy. Now, I made a 2-horse, don't remember, I think I made a 1-horse bet just on Over Deliver. But I thought Outshine had a chance if it was price. Well, we'll never know. We will never know. Taking nothing away from Tacitus and Tax, who they ran a great race and they won. The 2 horses I was looking to finished last and next to last. The 11 Jovia came over and a bunch of horses lost all chance. I had my eye. The 10 got knocked directly, and then the 6 got knocked and taken up. This is what I mean, that you need to get compensated for price because these things happen. And by the way, there aren't a lot of experts out there, or, oh, he's supposed to know, who will show you, hey, you know what? Sometimes things happen in a horse race, and I'm showing you that as an example that there is a random factor. There's a random factor which makes getting price really important. In the Santa Anita Derby, this was very, very close on the odds. The morning line favorites were at the top. I took a shot at Nolo Contesto at 16 to 1. Didn't win. Roadster came from off the pace and beat Game Winner, who was a 1-2 favorite. And the Arkansas Derby, couple of colts that we will be seeing again in the Kentucky Derby. Improbable. I didn't much think anyone can beat Improbable. I was looking a little bit at the 7 and the 4. I thought Omaha Beach was right there. But you know what? With an unknown pace scenario or a tricky pace scenario, I didn't think it was worth the bet. I may have had a few dollars on Tikvin 5 at 82 to 1, but, you know, Omaha Beach and Improbable looked the best, and I was surprised. I thought Improbable might beat Omaha Beach that day, but it didn't matter. Price wasn't there. So I just watch as a fan. Oh, look, the 3 beat the 1, not the 1 beat the 3. I don't even think. Finally, I think it's finally, in the Lexington, another twist of fate was on top with a gap. There were some prices. Namely, I was interested in Owendale and Knicks Go. I bet them both, by the way, primarily because the race came up as highly pressured, and I knew Owendale could close a little bit. It did well. Came from 8th and won the race, and that little $20 bet came back 274. A superfecta. I had some others with less combinations, but I just wanted to show you. I put the top 5 that were from Value Capper in the line, paid almost $200. Okay. So the point of all of that was Value Capper, through all its contrarianness, still put the horses that eventually wound up doing well, you know, near the top of the line. Now, again, didn't have Tacitus and Tax. Was that because of the trouble in the race, or was it because the program was wrong? I don't know. Can't say. All I know is what happened. The 11 horse came over, got disqualified, and I'll never know if the 6 would have run without that kind of interference. Don't know. It was just another bet. So at this point in the video, I just wanted to give a quick look at what Value Capper did with the 2019 Kentucky Derby. That's for those who don't want to go take the deep dive that I'm going to do after that into possible pace scenarios and why it's such a tricky race to project. Now, a funny thing happened on the way to the forum. I had finished this entire video. I was editing it and just about to push the button to get it up to you, and I was informed by my intrepid and very good friend Sam that Omaha Beach had been scratched. Omaha Beach, the morning line favorite, and more than that, the colt that figured to be the one who maybe would need to lead to win the race. So a lot of the pace projections depended on Omaha Beach. You see, with the way pace projection and putting all the fractions and the incremental velocity together, no horse is separate. You can't just draw a line and they just get kind of re-ranked. Now, it did work out a bit that way in this race. So this is a redo with Omaha Beach scratched. You see, with Omaha Beach in, there was, again, this big arc, the 11 horses or so above Random. Improbable was at the top, Game Winner, Win, Vekoma, and then Omaha Beach. Now, there were 12 colts above Random. The odds line started at 11 to 1 with Improbable. With Omaha Beach scratched, and with Bode Express, who I have a warm spot in my heart for because he triggered that big exacta when he went off at 72 to 1 and finished behind Maximum Security, he drew in. That changed the pace projection so that we have the same basic colts, but now Improbable is at top of the line with a little bit of a gap down to that same cluster of horses. Vekoma, Win, Game Winner, of course, and Spinoff. So, we still have 9 colts above Random. We still have a pretty high odds on the top colt, Improbable, at 8 to 1. Better than when he was 11 to 1 with Omaha Beach in and Bode Express out. What helps clarify this race a little more with Omaha Beach out is that there's a gap after Improbable and a gap after Spinoff. Okay, so honestly, if this race was presented to me on a normal day, I'd probably pass. Now, why? Well, first of all, the number of colts above random. I like dealing with a smaller group of above random horses, quote unquote. What is above random? What am I talking about? Well, if there are 20 horses or 20 colts in this race, well, random would be 19 to 1. 19 chances against and 1 for. Right? Got it? So the horse wins 19. So it's 19 to 1 with 20 horses is random. There's so many colts above 19 to 1. You don't usually get that large a field, so of course there's going to be a larger group of horses above random. Too many things going on, and in the average day there are scores of races to be looked at and to be played or to be passed. Now, second, one of the first premises of the value capping approach is to find a horse you like. So my question is there a horse liked when the line starts at 8 to 1? 8 to 1 means that if they ran the race 9 times, that horse would win once. Okay? Now, it's the Derby. I allow myself a recreational play on the Derby, and quite frankly, with all of the with such a large field and with all of the unschooled money in that pool, there's sometimes a windfall to be had. So let's take a look. One thing I want to point out, there is what I call a bit of anti-value on the colt that will now probably be the favorite in the race, the 16 game winner. And that is that he had a very hard race last night. In fact, 2 very hard races. When we look a little more closely, when we look at the past performances, we see both in the Santa Anita Derby and in the Rebel, he was second at the stretch and then really fought all the way down to the stretch to finish second in each of those races. Now, we're talking about a colt that's, was 4 for 4 as a 2-year-old, won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, had really tough, yes, maybe he really had tough races, but they certainly weren't poor races, although they were hard and perhaps took a bit out of game winner. And perhaps being in the 16 way out there, that's a very difficult post to overcome. Not saying that he can't. But with those 2 factors going on, I may have a flawed favorite. So, if I were given this and said, what would you do with this? And I'm going to get into very specific strategies after I go through a more detailed pace analysis with you. But if those of you don't want to watch, that's fine. I would use improbable if I got double digits odds. I mean, his line is 18 to 1. I'm going to need a very long price, maybe 15 to 1, which I don't think I'll get. My sense is that they're going to throw some money at Roadster and Tacitus and behind game winner, as well as improbable. Improbable may very well be the second favorite now in the race. So I don't think I'd get a price on him. So I think improbable will be bet. As far as some value potentials, I would be looking at the colts out of the bluegrass, namely Vekoma and Win-Win-Win. And I'll get into very specific scenarios about what with the track profile being different on different kinds of wet surfaces, if it is a wet surface, when I would prefer one over the other. As far as a long shot to use in exotics, it would be Spinoff and perhaps Maximum Security. But if you want to know why and all the details, stay with me. If this is all you wanted to see, gee, what did the Value Capper program do with the Derby? Oh, that's it. Goodbye. Well, thank you for joining me, and I really appreciate it. And you didn't have to sit through a long video. So for those of you who do want to take a deep dive, thank you, and let's do it. So here is Value Capper on the 2019 Kentucky Derby in depth. And in depth, I mean a deeper dive into the pace analysis than I usually do on the day-to-day races. You know, a claimer at Parks, a non-winners one at Belmont. You know, those are smaller fields and simpler, and the pace is much simpler. And here's, pardon me, the confounding thing. The weather in Louisville. I mean, clever boy. I went on to this thing called the internet, which I think is going to be big someday. And they project rain for Saturday, Derby Day. They also project that it's going to rain tomorrow, Thursday, and Friday as well. So we may have some kind of wet track come Derby Day. Why does that matter? Well, here are the track profiles for the last few derbies on a fast track. So in 2012, I'll have another. In 2014, California Chrome, reading upwards. 2015, the Triple Crown winner, American Pharaoh, and 2016, Nyquist. Now, notice something. In 2012, the winner was 6.5 lengths behind at the second call. But in 14, 15, and 16, they were a half a length back, a length and a half back, and 2 lengths back. But notice how close and clustered those percentage energies are. 51.7, 51.8, 51.9, 51.7. In my experience, this is a champion's profile. In other words, they expend their energy in the high 51s, and they're close to the pace. However, when Churchill was sloppy on Derby Day, we've got 2 of them recently. I'm not going back before 2012. But in 2013, when Orb won, he came from 14 lengths back. He was in the 17th position at the second call. He came from 14 lengths back and expended much, obviously, later, 51.04. In last year, when Justify won, he expended early and was right on the pace. Second at the first call, second at the second call, and then went on to win and expended in 52.89, which is early for the Derby. Interestingly, when Always Dreaming won 2 years ago in 2017, he was on the lead at the second call, and he expended early. So a wet track will probably favor the earlier runners, or the runners that expend their energy earlier. Please note, 5 of the last 7 Derby winners were 2 lengths or less back at the second call. Okay? So they were pressers, if you will. 6 of the last 7 Derby winners were favorites. So when I go squawk on about how the public has gotten good, and I believe because of the proliferation of pretty decent information, the public is not something to be scoffed at. Just because we have these fancy numbers and fancy software and fancy this and that, the public gets it right a lot. So when we're looking for value, we have to take that into account, right? We can't just dismiss the favorite because it's a short price. And in this case, with Game Winner having those 2 tough races after his 2-year-old season, now a champion can overcome that. Will he? Well, then he'll be a champion and a Derby winner. But remember that a wet track allowed an earlier percentage expending runner to win. And that'll be important when we play some what-if scenarios. Now, the other part to the projecting the pace puzzle is what the makeup of the race is. When I did about 2 hours of work taking these 20 horses apart by hand, which is something I don't usually do. Why? Because I've automated it. And in 95+% of the cases, it agrees with what I do. But it was Derby. I wanted to be doubly sure. And in fact, there were a couple of curveballs, including maximum security, which we'll get into in a second. However, the key point was Omaha Beach, which looked like the one committed need to lead horse, Colt. Now we've got Boat Express and Spinoff projected to be on or very near the lead at the first and second calls. Now there's some issues with that. They're going to be in the 19 and 20 posts. Okay? But notice how many colts want to press at the first and second calls, and there are more than these. As far as closers, there are a lot of closers. So because of the theoretical advantage that those outside horses, colts, may have in the first and second call, the software puts the race up as unpressured. Now, remember I told you this is a tricky pace scenario to project? Positionally, because of all of those pressors, positionally, the software puts this race as a pressured race. From position mixed with velocity, we get unpressured. Oh, can this get any more difficult? Well, let's do a deeper dive into the past performances of the horses that Value Capper likes. Now, remember, this is a difficult pace scenario to project, and part of that reason is because these colts are lightly raced. Some of them, look at Maximum Security. It's only got 4 races, and its last race was pretty slow as far as numbers are concerned. My numbers, the master pace ratings, are concerned. And will they be establishing a different style if they only have a handful of races? Don't know. So that's why it's difficult to project the pace. So on the committed early side, with Omaha Beach in, it looked like he would go for the lead. That's the way that horse, once it broke its maiden, won its last few races. Likely pressers, I think colts that we'll probably see for a little while up there early are the 2 Tax, the 4 Gray Magician, and the 6 Vekoma. The possible pressers are those colts we discussed before, way on the outside, Spinoff and Boat Express. Now, there are issues with those because some of those projections are made from fast sprint lines and very fast internal fractions in a route. As I said, the extreme outside posts on those 2 are problematic. Now, there are some big question marks, like the 7 Maximum Security, because of that last race being so slow in comparison to its other numbers. Bottom line, it looks as if these colts, the pressing colts and the one that may get a little bit of a lead and get pressed, may force a fast pace in the race, something around a 47-1, between 47 and 47-2, so call it 47-1, and a 111-2 or 3. Again, for a fast track. Probably this would hold up on something like a wet fast, and even sloppy. On a muddy or good track, might be slower than this. The closers who have been successful against this kind of pace are the 14 Win-Win-Win, the 8 Tacitus, and the 11 Heikel. Now, Value Capper confirms that this is a difficult pace position. You see, when there's a conflict like that up there, I mean, it's tricky to know, and especially in the Derby, whether this is going to go pressured or unpressured. But let's look at the main colts and see how they fare. Improbable is a positional fit, right? Because he's in perfect pressing position in all of his races, all 5 of his lifetime races. Second, fourth by a neck, third by 1, 2 by a half, and so forth. However, his energy expenditure is a little late. Game winner, after winning the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, taking a well-deserved rest, came back, fought tooth and nail. The position and the energy are in range. Those 2 hard races concern me, as well as breaking from a very outside post position. Now, Win-Win-Win's a very interesting colt from numbers. Its last 2 races, a third in the Tampa Bay Derby and a second in the Bluegrass to Vekoma, this colt closed from 8th position by 6.5 lengths back, and from 6th position 7.5 lengths back. And you may say that's positionally maybe too late. I would agree if the track is fast and it comes up as and the unpressured scenario works out. If, however, a speed duel among these pressing style horses develops, and that will favor a late colt, or if the track comes up good or muddy, this colt could be in a very good position to pick up the pieces at the end. Note that even though it made deep closes, do you see that 51.6 and 51.59, almost exactly the same expenditure this colt makes? That's not too far off the fast track profile for Churchill. And one little thing that I noted, and again, this is not something I usually look at. I just happen to know these colts. The grandsire is Sunday Silence. I saw him lose to Easy Goer after he had won the Kentucky Derby and Preakness. And then Smarty Jones, the dam sire, also won the Kentucky Derby and Preakness. And I know I'll probably be questioned about, well, how could you pick a bluegrass horse? Didn't even win the bluegrass. I mean, Vekoma won the bluegrass. How could you even give that a shot? Well, there was a little colt named Spectacular Bid who won the Derby and Preakness off the win in the bluegrass. So that's win-win-win. Interesting. The colt that beat win-win-win is Vekoma. Positionally, it looks flexible. Second by a head, 4 by 4, 3 by a half. It's in a good pressing place. Its percentage energy is a little early for a fast track. Now, if the track comes up sloppy or wet fast, this colt is worth a good look. And truth be told, if I get my price on this one and win-win-win, I will have a bet on it no matter what the track condition is, because I think it's not going to be bet. Here's a wild one, Spinoff. Second by not much in the Louisiana Derby. And its position and its energy look pretty flexible. In fact, all over the place. This is what I mean with a lightly raced colt. He's only got like 4 races. Won its maiden, took it easy at Saratoga after a layoff, came back off a layoff, blew away an allowance field, went into the Louisiana Derby, and boy, just ran a good race. I think this colt will be dismissed. I'm planning on using it in the exotics. Here's the wild card. Maximum Security. All kinds of interesting things. First of all, this colt won 4 races in a row. It triggered that beautiful exacta in the Florida Derby with Boat Express running second. If you look at its master pace number, and by the way, it's done nothing wrong, right? 4 lifetime races, 4 wins, and 4 rather impressive looking wins to me. When you look at the numbers, though, the 3 sprint numbers from Gulfstream, 156, 158.7, 158.6, those are much, much faster than the number this colt ran in the Florida Derby. Now, here's a question I can't answer with any certainty. Did this colt decline or have a performance bounce or whatever, or go down in its conditioning cycle in the Florida Derby, or was it just better than the field and it just basically coasted, just did enough to win? I don't know. What I do know from the numbers is that if you see, the reason that ValueCapper put this below random, put it way down on the line, is it only used that last line. If I go back and use the numbers from its sprints at Gulfstream, which I did in the Florida Derby, which is why I came way up on top and won like it, that brings this colt way up on the line. So positionally, it's early, and the percentage energy is pretty flexible. It had a lot in reserve in that last race, 49.5. And then it ran 51.48, which is in range, 52.37 in the mud, which is okay if it's wet, and 51.51. So, again, hard to tell with a colt that's won its 4 races rather impressively. So that's a wild card and a big question. Tacitus, as a 3-year-old, in the Tampa Bay Derby and the Wood Memorial, just made these tremendous closes. And as I'll explain to you later, if the race comes up pressured, or if it's a late race due to a muddy track condition, this is a colt that needs to be included. Its percentage energy is a little late, certainly in its last 2 races. Not overly so, just a bit. Tax, one of the pressers, positionally, you see, likes to run second and third in its second call. Its percentage energy is in range. However, its overall number, its master pace number, is not so good. So this would have to be, I think this colt may just be part of the pace. Actually, it's a gelding. And Boat Express, I'm putting this in just because I have a warm spot in my heart. And this colt's still a maiden. There have been maidens, right, that have won the Derby. He wasn't one of the first Triple Crown winners. I want to say Sir Barton was a maiden when he won the Derby, but I'd have to look it up. I used to know all this stuff off by heart. Its percentage energy is mostly early, really early. Look at the 52.3, 54.3, 53.08. Didn't run well in its one slop race. Just a very surprising performance in the Florida Derby. Not surprising ValueCapper to put it second on the line. So there are issues with it. But that second race back was awfully good, even in this field. And so we come to this puzzle. Pressured, unpressured. On the unpressured side, so this is with an early projection and an early odds bias. We have the 5 with a gap down to the 2 colts out of the Bluegrass, Vekoma and Win-Win-Win. We have Game Winner with its issue of the hard races, and we have the long shot spinoff. So to play a what-if game, if we put it to a neutral projection, we say, gee, I don't know if it's going to go early, if it's going to go pressure or it's going to go unpressured. Let's cut the difference and let's put it up at neutral. We see that same group of colts. Improbable, Game Winner, Win-Win-Win, Vekoma. Okay? I'm still troubled with what to do with maximum security other than including that colt in exotics. And again, this is all going to be price dependent. Like Improbable, I'm going to need, double digits. And I don't think with Omaha Beach out, I will be getting it. There's an unknown pace projection. There's a foreign horse. There's a large number of colts above random, and important, the line starts at 11-1. For these reasons, it'll be a secondary bet. Okay, so in my primary betting portfolio, this is this pot. Nothing's coming out of there to bet this race. Secondary bet. Recreational, if you will, because it's the Derby, and I think there might be a shot to make a little money. On all the scenarios, I'm going to be focusing on the two horses that are in the top cluster that have a chance to be, that look reasonable and have a chance to be the price, the Bluegrass horses that ran 1-2 in the Bluegrass, the 14 Win, and the 6 Vekoma. Again, I'm going to need 20 to 1 to bet them. If they're both 20 to 1, I'll bet both of them. Again, I would bet Improbable at a 12-ish to 1 range. I don't think I'm going to get that. And you may say, well, Michael, what do you do if Improbable goes off at 12 to 1 and Win goes off at 20 to 1 and Vekoma goes off at 30 to 1, Spinoff goes off to 45 to 1. I pass the race. I mean, that means you don't have a grasp on the race. I already told you, from a pace scenario point of view, I really don't have that strong a grasp on the race. I have to make a lot of calls. As I said, I would look to Improbable if I get double-digit odds. For long prices to include in the exotics, I'll look to the 7 Maximum Security. Don't know how long that colt will be, actually. But I do know the 19 will be long because, it's in the 19 hole and it hasn't been running against much. So that'll be my general approach unless the track gets slow, gets muddy or good. And the early races that day show late runners doing well. In that case, I'm going to emphasize the 14 Win as my main play. And then I'm going to include the 8 Tacitus in the exotics. I'll still use the reversal winner and fulcrum, meaning the 6 Vekoma. Of course I'm going to use that. I'll use some of the logical horses. Even though that's a quote-unquote late scenario, I'm still going to have colts like Spinoff in there to try to hit a home run with not too much invested. So I wish I could be clearer about this Derby, but I just don't know where the opportunity is going to lie. But in other words, I can't make the Derby produce a good value bet. But what I will tell you from playing this game for a long time, on the big days, the good value opportunities often appear in the undercards. There was that bomb on Florida Derby Day in the first race at Gulfstream Park that I've shown you. Go back and watch the last few videos that I've done where I've shown you. I only picked one other, I only pointed out one other undercard race. Not so much that it was such a great race, but because it's the kind of race I like to look for. See, I use software because I used to do all those numbers by hand for years. I mean, there was a period of 3 years where I would do every line in the racing form, every horse in the Eastern edition of the racing form. That's when it was still in the big, not the tabloid edition, but the big journal edition. And I would do it for every line, do feet per second, do expenditure. Got good at it. I got a real feel for the numbers, okay? It was great. I'm glad I did it. Don't do it anymore because I've automated that. So I don't want to go back and do all of that. I like to look at races that look easier, like one of the undercard races. It's the next race at Churchill after the Derby, the 13th. And there's a horse right on top. The 2 get the prize. I'm not going to go into an extensive analysis. He's got a gap. The morning line maker makes it 10 to 1. We think that the public shouldn't like him. He's the only advanced form pattern in the arc. He's got a gap. There's a closing horse, Limonite, the 1, that in a highly pressured scenario can do well as well. I would look to get 8 or 10 to 1 on Get the Prize. I'd be looking at 15 to 1 to bet Limonite. I'm going to have them hooked up in an exotic. That's the kind, again, I've got to get my price. You see how much easier this looks than that long list of Derby races. So not necessarily this race, but look for easier, simpler races in the undercards where the public, and there's a lot of amateur money that comes out on these days, as you know, where they're just over betting for no good reason a favorite. And you can do well. Not just the undercard at Churchill, but at the other tracks, because they all come to the track to watch the Derby. There's lots of simulcast going on. Everyone wants to be in on the action on Derby. And look, it's an exciting day. I still love it. I've been to a gaggle of derbies. There's nothing like it in sport, nothing like I've ever seen. So that's my rant. I can't say thank you enough for joining me on this. For those of you who left earlier, you're not hearing this, but I can't say thank you enough for those of you who have gotten the software, have come on the Wizards forum and so forth, for supporting each other. Yes, for supporting our work here, but for supporting each other. I can't even begin to say thank you enough. And most of all, thank you for your interest in really the nuances of not just the details of the game and of handicapping and then value capping, but of wanting to learn more about an approach that requires patience and discipline. And it's not about someone telling you, I got a lock and just pay me $20, $50, $200, and I will show you. No, what good is that? Value capping is about patience and discipline. It's about investing a bankroll you already have and don't need for anything else other than that. It's called an investment. It's a very risky investment. But it can be also very rewarding, not only in learning those virtues, if you will, of focus, of patience, of discipline, eschewing that kind of gamblers, bet nothing and win a whole bunch every race and woohoo, that kind of immature thinking about the game. Because having a group of sober, not in in the sense of serious, and not grouchy serious. I mean, I'm serious as a you-know-what when I'm looking at the past performances and the software. But serious about betting when everything is right, as Ray Talbot would say, and the price is right as well. Betting horses I like that the public shouldn't, running preferably against flawed favorites, waiting for my price. And let the bet make you. Develop a felt sense. Anyway, enjoy the Derby. Thank you so much again for spending this time with me. Wait for your price. Let the bet make you. I amuse myself, and I'll see you soon.